Cross-Chancellor Joe Gow. Joe? I note, Regent Crane, that this is Chancellor Gow's first meeting, and he's here with his name tag. Joe's been on the campus for just 8 days, or in the job for 8 days, not on the campus that whole time. He's been out and about, and he's spending his initial time getting to know the students and faculty and staff and leaders in the La Crosse area. Until his arrival, we were really very fortunate to have, working as interim chancellor, Provost Liz Hitch, keeping watch on the campus for the last several months, and we'll have an opportunity tomorrow morning to thank her more formally for her great work in that role. Joe comes to us from Nebraska Wesleyan University in Lincoln, where he was serving as the interim president and had been provost and dean of the College of Arts and Sciences there. He's also been a dean at Winona State University in Minnesota, just across the river, a perch from which he said last night at the La Crosse Capitol reception, which I was privileged to attend, a perch from which he often envied UW La Crosse. So Joe, sometimes envy turns into wish fulfillment, and here you are. Dr. Gow earned his PhD in speech communication and his bachelor's degree in journalism from Pennsylvania State University, his master's degree in speech communication from the University of Alabama. He also completed the management development program at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Dr. Gow is known as a talented blues singer and guitarist who counts Elvis Presley and Muddy Waters among his musical influences. So it's great to have him here as a colleague in Wisconsin. Hearty welcome to you, Joe. Thanks. Back to you, Regent Davis.
Thank you. And returning to our agenda, we have 2 items on the docket this morning. First, the UW system's criteria for approval of Wisconsin Technical College System collegiate transfers. And second, UW system's freshman admissions policy. And at this time, we'll proceed. As you know, the Education Committee held a special meeting on January 22nd, 2007 to consider the criteria for approval of WTCS collegiate transfer programs. We had a lengthy and productive discussion, one that was greatly enhanced by my colleague, Regent King, whom I would like to sincerely and publicly thank for helping us engage so deeply in the ways that were sometimes difficult with the set of issues that are encompassed by the criteria. While we didn't reach consensus at that time, we came very close, and I'd like to also thank the other members of the Education Committee for their thoughtful contributions to the discussion. The criteria address a deeply complicated set of issues, principles, and practices, ones that we know are not merely theoretical, but will have enormous impact on the educational pathways of Wisconsin citizens. In the end, we recognize the criteria are UW systems criteria, and they reflect the needs, priorities, and practices of our institutions in terms of program and curricular development, student access, fiscal well-being, and the integrity of our missions. I won't present a formal summary of our January 22nd meeting, except to say that at the end of the January 22nd meeting, by majority, we voted to adopt Resolution 11B, now known as Resolution A in your packets, adopting the UW systems criteria for approval of Wisconsin Technical College System collegiate transfer. Tomorrow, we, the board, will vote as a full board on Resolution A. But at this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Interim Senior Vice President Rebecca Martin, who will provide some background and context on this issue.
Thank you. My role this morning is to provide a review of the collaborative process and what has transpired since the December 7th board meeting. And let me say at the outset that despite some differences that remain between the UW system and the Wisconsin Technical College system on the set of criteria in front of you, there has all along been good faith dialogue and collaboration moving us forward toward a set of workable guidelines designed to enhance student transfer between the 2 systems. Indeed, none of us have wavered in our efforts to put the interests of our students first. I'd also like to thank those people who have dedicated so much time to this effort, including members of my own staff, Ron Singer and Larry Rubin, members of the WTCS Central Office, Kathy Cullen, Annette Severinsen, and Morna Foy. And I would especially like to thank Regents Keene and Davis for the remarkable leadership they have both shown in getting us to where we are today. Since the December Regents meeting, there have been multiple meetings of UW system staff and WTS staff with the goal of working out the differences that remained and reaching consensus on a set of criteria and guidelines for collegiate transfer. The points of departure were the draft criteria the Regents saw at the December meeting, including a set of suggested edits from Regent King. In addition, we held a meeting on January 16th, which included 3 UW chancellors, Hitch, Wells, and Wilson, 1 UW College's Dean, Benenga, and 3 WTCS presidents, Eilenfeld, Knox, and Gorbetsky, as well as the UW and WTCS staff that I just mentioned. The goal of this meeting was to make further inroads toward reaching consensus, and indeed we accomplished considerable progress at that time. That meeting also allowed us to reach the conclusion that, in the end, the criteria document that you have in front of you today reflects the UW system's point of view and is a UW system document. We made that clear at the special meeting of the Education Committee held on January 22nd. That meeting, as Regent Davis noted, was very productive, and we reviewed the criteria in great detail. We made additional changes that day as suggested by various members of the committee. Regent King painstakingly took us through a set of amendments she proposed, some, but not all, of which were adopted. Since that meeting, we have continued to work with WTCS staff and with Regent King to move further toward consensus, and I believe today we are very close.
And now I understand. We have a motion to amend the motion we previously adopted as an education committee.
Yes, we do, Madam Chair. Thank you. I do have a motion to amend, and I know the committee members all have a copy of the amendment. Fair board. As we speak. For those of you who have your board packets, this would be on page 3 of the criteria where the amendment would be added. Under Roman numeral 3, 3A1C would be the addition, and it would be added at page 3. But before I read my proposed amendment, I would like to thank all, as everyone has said, we have had quite a rigorous conversation over several months, and the committee has been wonderful, as well as the staffs of both systems. And I especially like to thank President Riley for working closely on this issue. Thank you for that. So with that, I would like to move to amend the criteria by adding paragraph C, as everyone has a copy, in which I will read. A WTCS district that does not have the liberal arts degree authority and is not proposing to offer a degree in collaboration with a UWS institution as described in section 3A1B, if the board, that would be us, Board of Regents, concludes that such a collaboration is not effective and efficient, the board will make every effort, working with the president and the chancellors of the UWS, to see that effective and efficient collaboration between the two systems occurs in the best interest of students and taxpayers before reaching such a conclusion.
Is there a second to the motion? To do that, Judy, that would be Mike Spector. That would be Mike Spector who seconded the motion. And I'd like to inform the board, remind the board that this vote that we're about to take has to be among the Education Committee members. So is there any discussion on the part of the Education Committee? Sure.
Just a comment before we endorse it. This brings up, of course, the broader issues, and that's the future of the colleges and the technical centers as far as sources of good students for undergraduate degrees in the system. I mean, there's a history here. It's fuzzy in my mind, but at one time the colleges were centers, and I think attached to a mother campus, there was the idea that students from that center would go to this campus, and this was changed along the way. Now they're colleges, and there's a history here that we should look at when we go forward. Second, I think that Mary's on the board for a reason. We should support her when she has a proposal, as is Libby, who is here for a good reason. And I remember when we were in Green Bay and we all sat around and we endorsed and were enthusiastic about the proposal presented to us by the chancellor there on their initiative.
and we should remember that. So I hope that in the future that not only do we expand the opportunities for technical school college students to go to the University of Wisconsin as transferred, but that we'd also embrace that. And with that, I certainly will vote yes.
Yes, Judy?
Danae, I'm assuming after the vote on this, then we'll be talking about the entire document.
Exactly.
I think anybody who was at the Education Committee meeting knows what this says, but I wonder if it might be helpful for some explanation to be made about what this means.
Well, just to clarify, the paragraph that we're voting on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is what I mean. I think that Larry, when he walks through the entire document, will be doing that. And so if the Education Committee is comfortable at this point, I think it will make more sense in the context of the rest of the document.
You okay with that, Judy? Okay. How about if I call for the vote of the Education Committee? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. And now I think I turn it over to Larry Rubin, who will then walk us through the entire resolution or the guidelines and criteria. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Regent Davis, before I begin, I'm wondering whether we might want to suggest using the same process that we used when we discussed this with the Education Committee, that before we entertain any questions, that I would have a chance to walk through all of the sections. Is that okay if we do that way? And we do have a couple of handouts that are being passed around, too, that I will be referring to as we go forward. Good morning. Over the past few months, the Education Committee has actually considered a number of different versions of this document, as you've heard. And the one before you today is the one that was approved by the Education Committee at its special January meeting. As I go through the document, I will focus primarily on the key areas and on the issues that were discussed at that meeting and the decisions that resulted from that discussion. However, before turning right to that document, I think, primarily for the benefit of those of you who have not been involved in these conversations, I think it would be very helpful to take a few minutes and provide some background and context on the type of degree programs that are being offered in the technical college system, and in particular, those that this board will be considering. You might want then to reference the first of the two documents that are being passed out as I talk through this. WTCS offers two general types of associate degrees, the applied associate degree and the collegiate transfer associate degree. The applied associate degree is designed to prepare students for employment in a particular program area and often does serve as a terminal degree. The degree consists of about 21 to 30 credits of general education courses and about 36 to 49 credits of technical studies coursework. And even though this is not intended to be a transfer degree, we do get a good number of students with these applied degrees transferring to UW institutions, often to complete a baccalaureate degree in a related program area. Students in these programs may currently transfer up to 30 credits of the general education coursework toward a baccalaureate degree, in addition to some of their occupational and technical coursework. Students in these degree programs can also utilize one of more than 500 articulation agreements that have been developed between the two systems to transfer additional credits toward their degree program. Today, however, we're going to be focusing on the other type of degree, the collegiate transfer associate degree. WTCS has two types of collegiate transfer degrees, the liberal arts and the pre-professional. The liberal arts associate degree consists of 64 credits, the vast majority of which are liberal arts general education courses. And in fact, this degree is very similar to the associate degree that's offered in the UW colleges and a number of our baccalaureate institutions. This degree is offered currently at 3 WTCS districts: MATC Madison, MATC Milwaukee, and Nicolet Area Technical College. The second of the collegiate transfers degrees is the pre-professional associate degree, which is a new degree for the technical colleges. This degree consists of 40 to 45 credits of liberal arts general education courses and 18 to 21 credits in a pre-professional core area such as engineering or business. This degree is intended to articulate directly with the related four-year baccalaureate degree program. As you know, by statute, any broadening of these collegiate transfer programs needs the approval of both boards. And the document that we are going to be reviewing today would become the guidelines and criteria that you would use in considering such programs. So now if you want to take out that document, I'd like to begin walking through that. I thought it might be best to go over this document one section at a time, focusing on those areas that have been modified from some of the previous documents. So let's first turn to section 1, Roman numeral 1, entitled Principles. And in that section, we see that the goal of collegiate transfer programs is to enhance credit transfer and to expand opportunities for Wisconsin residents to earn baccalaureate degrees in ways that do not unnecessarily duplicate existing programs and offerings. Under Roman numeral 1b, avoiding unnecessary duplication is achieved by considering all program options currently available and ensuring that the program meets a long-term student need, that it draws upon the existing strengths and resources of the technical college and UW institutions, and that the institution identifies and justifies the resources needed to support the program. Now, this section met with general agreement, except there was some discussion of the term that's used, state higher educational resources, which is found in 1b and also in two other spots later in the document. The issue here was whether it is appropriate for one higher educational agency to consider and address how other higher educational agencies use their resources. The Education Committee believed that the Board of Regents has an obligation to think more broadly about the use of resources as they relate to the entire state higher education system, and thus left the language in as you see it. Turning now to the section on liberal arts, Roman numeral 2, the overriding concern in this section is how extensive the broadening of liberal arts programs will be in the technical college system. There was overall agreement that before a new liberal arts program was approved, a district had to first establish a need for the program, and it had to clearly demonstrate that a UW institution could not accommodate that need. The Education Committee believed that the language that is found in section 2A1 would set reasonable and appropriate parameters on liberal arts program development in WTCS. Another important item in this section is B1. This calls for there to be ongoing communication between the two systems and the institutions about any proposed new program throughout the review process. And a similar statement is made in reference to pre-professional programs as well. Another area where there was some debate was in section 2C1. The original language in that section required that a UWS institution had to review and approve for transfer the WTCS liberal arts courses as a criterion for program approval. Now, in the discussion, one point of view on this was that the approval of the courses by a UWS institution should not be a required condition because there might be cases where the articulation or partnership would be with a non-UW institution, and this requirement for approval by a UW institution could preclude such a collaboration. The other point of view was that although a partnership with a UW institution was always preferred, although not required, even in situations where the partner was a non-UW institution, there would very likely be a number of students who might want to transfer this degree and these credits to a UW institution. Therefore, early consideration by at least one UW of whether these courses would transfer would clearly be advantageous to prospective transfer students. Well, after rather lengthy discussion on this point, the Education Committee decided on the language that you see here, which says formal review and, if possible, approval of the curriculum is obtained from at least one UWS institution. I believe their rationale for this was that if a large number of courses were found not to be transferable in that early review to a UW institution, the board could decide against approving the program if steps weren't taken to resolve that issue. However, if the case was that maybe only one or two courses were not approved as part of that process, this would still leave the board with the option to approve the program in such a situation. Let me turn now to the next section on pre-professional programs, Roman numeral 3. The primary issue with the pre-professional degree section centers around which WTCS districts may offer these kinds of programs and who they can partner with. When the pre-professional degree program was originally recommended and endorsed by the Committee on Baccalaureate Expansion, the COBE Committee, which was a joint UW-WTCS group, these programs were to be offered only in districts that had liberal arts degree authority, as it says in section A1 little a. The thinking behind this was that only these districts offered the collegiate transfer coursework that was required for the program. Any other district that would be given the opportunity to have this degree would have to develop a new set of courses, both in liberal arts general education and the pre-professional core. Courses developed for this purpose at non-liberal arts districts would then be available not only to students in the pre-professional program, but also to any other student in the district. And this would provide an opportunity for students to use the technical college institution as sort of a backdoor transfer institution where they could take these courses at lower tuition rates than at UW institutions. Section 3A1B, however, does provide for the potential of non-liberal arts districts to offer pre-professional degrees, but only if they are offered in partnership with one or more UW institutions. Under this partnership, as stated in little I, the collaboration would draw on the respective strengths of the institutions, that is, liberal arts in the UW and pre-professional in the technical colleges, when it is feasible to do so. It would be left to the collaborating institutions to determine the appropriate courses for the degree, with consideration of transfer as a key component. It would also be left to the collaborating institutions to determine which among them would be in the best position to offer the individual courses, drawing where feasible on the respective strengths of the institutions. Now, to help understand this, let me provide you with an example. There is currently a collaborative pre-professional degree proposal in the works in manufacturing engineering between Northeast Wisconsin Technical College, UW Green Bay, and UW Stout. Under this collaboration, students would complete the associate degree at NWTC that would articulate to the UW Stout Manufacturing Engineering program. UW Green Bay would offer a number of the general education courses as part of that associate degree, particularly in the areas of math and science. UW Stout would provide the last 2 years of the manufacturing engineering degree at the NWTC Green Bay campus. According to this proposal, the partnership would allow learners to access a quality education and a highly marketable degree while keeping graduate engineers here in Northeast Wisconsin. Now, I should add that this particular proposal has not yet been considered by either board at this point, but I use it as an example of a collaboration that would seem to fit into the spirit of these guidelines. As called for in this section, a partnership with one or more UW institutions, which would have to include a baccalaureate institution that offers a related four-year degree, would still be a required element. That is to say that the partnership could not be exclusively with a non-UW institution. Now, WTCS had suggested that although they would always first seek partnerships with UW institutions in offering these programs, they would like there to be an option to partner with a non-UW institution if collaboration with the UW institution was not able to be worked out. And it's this amendment that you just endorsed in the Education Committee that makes this now a possibility. Now, as I mentioned at the outset, once you approve the guidelines and criteria in this document, you will use them to review WTCS Collegiate Transfer Program proposals approved by the WTCS Board, the first of which will be discussed this afternoon in the Education Committee. So I would like, therefore, to finish up by reiterating what I would term to be the three key criteria that are embedded in this document: need, collaboration, and resources, and what the primary focus is in each of these areas. And these are listed in the second handout that you have. Essentially, need would focus on whether the program meets a demonstrated long-term need that is not currently served by a WTCS or UWS institution, and where it has been clearly demonstrated that UWS institutions cannot accommodate the need. In terms of collaboration, the focus is on whether collaboration with existing UWS or WTCS programs has been investigated and, when appropriate, initiated. And finally, on the issue of resources, the focus is on whether the program is an efficient and effective use of state higher educational resources. With that, I would be ready, along with Rebecca and Ron, to answer any questions about these criteria.
Well, but just before that, and in accordance with my script, I believe that President Riley would also like to make some remarks.
Sure. Thank you, Regent Davis. Let me, in a very preliminary way this morning, try to take you up to 30,000 feet, try to frame this discussion about the guidelines and their application to the Chippewa Valley Tech proposal to offer an associate in science transfer degree. In the broader context, I think we're all struggling to grasp, because we know this is about the broader context. It's not just about the guidelines in front of us. It's not just about Chippewa Valley Tech proposal. What's the big picture here, as I see it? What's going on with the what some of us sense as the movement of the tectonic plates of higher education in Wisconsin these days? Let me take you back to a year ago, February of 2006, the region meeting where I unveiled to this board the growth agenda for Wisconsin. I said then that Wisconsin needed its public university to step up in the 21st century to do three things. One, produce more baccalaureate degree holders. Two, attract more baccalaureate degree holders here from outside Wisconsin, and 3, grow the knowledge economy jobs that will employ both. Produce more, attract more, grow the jobs that will hold both. Why? Because we know that having a higher percentage of baccalaureate degree holders in the state is tied to the per capita income in the state, and we want to drive up that per capita income, which now it should be and is slipping back behind our competitors in the upper Midwest and national. By virtue of some very hard work by people in this room and around the state, our faculty, staff, students, business and community leaders, regents, we persuaded many of our fellow Wisconsinites, including some of the most influential ones, of how central the growth agenda is to the future success of all Wisconsin residents. So we find ourselves here now, congregated again a year later, with the governor having decided to include the growth agenda as a cornerstone of his 2007-9 budget proposal. So we want to thank the governor for that, and we look forward to demonstrating to legislators over the next several months, with the help of community and business leaders in each of their districts, how important the growth agenda is for their constituents. As we build the growth agenda from the ground up, each of our institutions crafted their particular piece of it based on the needs of their region, the mission and resources of their campus, and the nature of their students. In doing so, we ramped up the movement that I think had already begun before we articulated the growth agenda. The driving creativity and energy of UW colleagues statewide to think big, to think different, to think across traditional higher education borders and boundary structures. All in the interest of having more and more of our fellow citizens, more highly educated, with the credentials to show for it, so that we can be competitive at the high-skill, high-wage end of the global economy as a state. As a result of encouraging that positive change and ferment, this board has coming before it a number of ideas for doing our public higher education business in new ways that are evolving to meet the needs of a populace that is increasingly, I think, waking up to their individual and our collective educational challenges in this state. In an effort to better serve their students in the state, our institutions, both in the UW and in the technical college system, have what I'll call upward aspirations. Let's think about it. The tech colleges, and this goes to the guidelines in front of us and the proposal that we'll talk about today from Chippewa Valley Tech, the tech colleges want to offer more liberal arts and sciences transfer degrees and pre-professional programs. The recently released report of the Commission on the Future of the UW Colleges recommends that we consider select baccalaureate degree authority for our two-year institutions. Our comprehensive campuses, now offering baccalaureate and master's degrees, are showing increasingly interest in clinical doctorates in allied health areas because accrediting bodies are dictating that graduates will need to have the doctorate to practice in those professions. UW-Milwaukee is proposing to offer a much broader array of PhD programs to complement an expanded research mission linked to the economic development and high-paying job growth in our state's most populous region. And UW-Madison is stepping up to ever higher levels of world-class research and development to address some of the most pressing social and economic and environmental and medical challenges facing Wisconsin and the globe. In short, there's an awful lot of upward motion that wants to break through a bunch of old glass ceilings. And that's good. That's good. It's what the growth agenda for Wisconsin is all about. Again, having more Wisconsinites with higher levels of education and the credentials to show for it so that we can compete strongly in the knowledge economy. Our challenge, I submit, in that environment is to figure out how best to manage that robust and positive energy in a way that is, one, educationally effective, that's the quality issue, and two, cost efficient. That's the don't hose the taxpayers in the process issue. Ways that are educationally effective and cost efficient. How do we manage that positive energy? How do we do that? The answer is not, I'd submit, to simply let every institution offer everything, because that approach would be neither educationally effective, quality would suffer, nor cost efficient. The taxpayers would wind up paying more per student to support higher education. So how do we do it? I'd suggest that we use the university center concept as the big frame for all of this going forward. Having a campus where there is a demonstrated student need, host degrees from one or more campuses that already offer those degrees, or having 2 or more campuses offer those degrees jointly. Now, can we actually do this? Well, we know we can. Why do we know we can? We know we can because we're already doing a lot of it all over the state, doing more and more of it every day. Let me just give you a few examples. I have a list here of, I don't know, somewhere between 50 and 70 baccalaureate degree programs that are now offered on our UW college campuses. When I came to the state 10.5 years ago, there was hardly any of this going. We now have this going on all over the state on our campuses. 4-year degrees are being offered because the students in those regions need those degrees and want to have them. We've figured out a way to do this. University center concept. Have we figured it all out? No. Are there still a lot more things that need to be worked out? Yes. But we're doing it now. Let me give you a few other examples. UW Stout is offering programs on many of the tech college campuses. 4-year Stout baccalaureate degrees, upper division programs related to the tech college associate degree programs that are being offered on those campuses. We have examples like the UW Fox Valley offering, in combination with Fox Valley Tech, 1+1 program where students can literally walk across the street in those 2 adjoining campuses and complete a collaboratively offered degree program. Some of these degree programs are offered collaboratively in that sense, with one of the campuses actually awarding the degree. In other instances, the degree is actually awarded consortium, with a number of different campuses having their name on the diploma that the student receives. A few more examples. Right now, UW-Milwaukee and the Medical College of Wisconsin are offering a joint PhD in medical informatics. This is a partnership between a public institution and a private institution. A bigger boundary span that's been spanned, bigger barrier that's been jumped. We'll have coming forward from UW-Milwaukee shortly a proposal for a PhD in public and community health, offered jointly with the Medical College of Wisconsin. A lot of you know about our collaborative nursing program, offered online with the five campuses in the UW system that offer BSN degrees working together to get that coursework, those degrees, to largely working nurses where they live and work across Wisconsin and in one of the degree variations across the country. We have an MBA program offered online by 5 of our campuses now, consortium, with their names appearing on the degree. We have a clinical doctorate in physical therapy that's offered jointly between UW-La Crosse and UW-Milwaukee. We have a clinical doctorate in audiology, offered jointly between Madison and Stevens Point. I won't go on and on and on, but the point I'm trying to make is that we're already using what I'm calling the university center concept quite extensively to step up to the needs of the people of Wisconsin. I think in continuing to develop that kind of approach, we could give what I'll call the right of first service to institutions that already have the mission to offer the degree in question, provided that they adequately meet our 2 goals. Can they offer the degree educationally effectively and cost efficiently? Using that concept, we might be able to work out in the process a new definition of a flexible, collaborative, cross-sector higher education system in Wisconsin that we acknowledge will continue to evolve to meet the knowledge economy needs of our citizens in the state. Again, there will be a lot of working out, a lot of evolving that needs to be done in that process, but that's what we need to do, simply put, to serve our students, and we are already well underway in that direction. In the process, I think we would be making the individual institutional boundaries, geographic, financial, bureaucratic boundaries that mean a lot less to our students than they mean to us, because we have institutions to run, and that's important, that those institutions be run well and be run with quality. But those kinds of boundaries, the geographic, financial, and bureaucratic boundaries really are a lot less meaningful to our students than they used to be, and certainly than they are to us. And we'd be making, if we do this, those boundaries more permeable. While I'd argue we'd be at the same time perhaps sharpening our definitions of institutional service niches and brands among our institutions. That, again, is something we've begun to do in the way we shaped the growth agenda, of letting each of our institutions come forward with a particular proposal, all of which are different from each other, to contribute to meeting the big purpose here of the growth agenda. So, these are very preliminary thoughts of this kind, but I know from talking to many of the regents, I know from talking to many of the chancellors and provosts, and I know from talking to colleagues in the tech college system, Dan Clancy and his staff, we're all wondering about these big questions. And I think it's time to start placing individual decisions that we make in that kind of a broader context consciously, and acknowledging that we're doing so. So in the coming months, working with all of you, I hope to be able to flesh out this university center concept for the future of higher education in our state. Right now, I'd say we have before us for consideration a document that's written in the spirit of that university center concept, including the amendment that Regent Keene introduced, and I hope the Ed Committee and the board can accept and approve the entire document.
Very well said, and I for one, have to admit enthusiastically that I needed to be reminded of what is going on well, and in the context that you've set forth, Kevin, so I do appreciate the bigger picture, and I enthusiastically look forward to the bigger conversations that facilitate that transparency, if you will. So thank you very much for that. Are there questions on the part of the board with respect to Resolution A as amended?
The board or the committee?
Well, I thought questions and discussion could be had by all, because that's why we're doing it all regions. Invited?
All right.
Okay. So I think I'm going to go with Libby first, and I'll recognize you. Libby?
Thank you. It's very important, I believe, what President Riley just laid out, because when we look back to what was the impetus that created all of those wonderful collaborations that you listed that indeed have maximized flexibility for students throughout our state, and what the word that was used many, many years ago was creating a seamless system for the student. And when you look back, it was our predecessors. It was Catherine Lyle and Ed Chin and John Benson and Rolf Genke, who formed a PK-16 leadership council, came together and decided that they had to have that vision in our state. And indeed, that's what happened. And that's what led to many of these agreements and the articulations and these collaborations. And I just feel that what you've said now, Kevin, is so very important, because we must come together in partnership, not with one entity dominating or feeling that they're sort of holding all the cards. But we do have to come together in the kind of partnership that I believe this process, which has been a tremendous struggle, and I commend Danae and Mary and the Education Committee. I serve on both these boards, and I see the angst of both of the boards in dealing with these issues. And this is a very, very important step forward. And so I just want to commend President Riley for laying that out the way you did, and just reaffirm that we have to work together on this. One of the things that coming out of the K-12 system that I can tell you, there are plenty of students to go around. Our poverty rate in this state is rising exponentially. Our Title I allocation, which is based on free and reduced lunch per state, was just increased beyond belief because of the number of free and reduced lunch children we have. These children are going to need to have post-secondary education.
They're going to need to have lots of flexibility. Those will be our traditional students. We know that our non-traditional students need that kind of flexibility. They need a seamless system. And that's what I'm hearing today, that we are affirming, that we are committed to an equal partnership, PK through 16, of working together in collaboration to really serve in a flexible and most efficient and highest quality for the children and the citizens of this state. So this is a big deal, and I really commend those who've worked so hard to get us to this point, and I will indeed be voting for this too.
Regent Loftus.
Well, I want to also endorse the President's remarks and perhaps bring his plane down to earth. And, take the train. I think the train has left the station on this. Where these transfer programs exist, they are enthusiastically embraced students for two reasons. It's a way into the university, and the cost is a lot less. If you look at this recent counselor update that we were sent from the UW-Madison Office of Admissions, it's all about, it's the parents and students to say there's another way into UW-Madison. And they go through the Connections program, the Guaranteed Transfer program, the transfer contracts with 3 technical colleges, and the rather remarkable statistic that 20% of graduates of UW-Madison are now transfer students. There is a great interest of this, I think, by this board to embrace all of this. Why? Well, for one reason, we need a more diverse group of students with equal graduation rates to traditional freshman admission by these transfer programs. This is a diversity program in addition to everything else. I think if there's a cloud in the silver lining was, well, what was the big opposition to Mary's proposal?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, what was that?
Yeah, I think that if that is just a symptom of battling bureaucracies, then I think that we have to get past that.
Any other discussion? Yes, Aces.
Yes, I wanted to commend the Education Committee and also just give some additional background in terms of what we're doing here. Earlier in our tenure here, we addressed the issue of collegiate transfers, and as some of you might know, I worked at MATC, one of the 3 liberal arts institutions in the WCTS system, and I recalled when we as faculty members were working with 4-year institutions in articulating on a course-by-course basis over a long period of time something that we did here and expedited here in a very short period of time. And I was very happy to see that work that we did earlier 2 years ago in enhancing the ability of our students in the WCTS system to transfer to our comps and to other institutions. I think I want to commend the Education Committee in regards to the guidelines for the pre-professional programs, but I have a question in regards to the standards or guidelines that are used for the adoption of new liberal arts programs. Having said that, I've worked at one of the 3 that are now offering these degrees. In the pre-professional programs, you have that if a WTCS district does not have a liberal arts program and wants to offer a pre-professional program, they have to accept the stipulations that you have in I and 2I there, which I am completely in agreement with. But if you look at the guidelines for WTCS campuses that wants to establish a liberal arts program, as Vice President Rubin mentioned, you have to demonstrate that a UWS institution cannot accommodate that need, but you don't have what you have for the pre-professional programs, that these collaborations should draw on the respective strength of that institution. And I just wondered if there was any discussion in your committee in that regard. You have that in the principles, that right on top of that same page, so that is page number 2, 2B, approved programs should draw upon existing strength and resources. I already mentioned the fact that if you want to offer pre-professional programs and you don't have a liberal arts degree, you have to base that need not only on existing resources, but you also have to have a stipulation that you don't have in the liberal arts program. You see where I'm referring to, Regent Davis? Is there any particular reason that you didn't have that clause? You have it in the
Now, just to be
principles.
specific, you are talking about with respect to professional programs, A, 1B, the parenthetical in little I, is that what you're saying? It's not.
You have
It's not
in the pre-professional programs, you have that if you want to offer pre-professional programs and you don't have a liberal arts degree, then you have to collaborate and draw on this respective strength. But in offering liberal arts programs on the previous page, if you look at the guidelines, Vice President Rubin just noted that you have to demonstrate that UWS institutions can accommodate that need, but you don't have the petitioning district or campus has to have strength and resources as you do in the offering of the professional program. Was there any reason why you didn't put that these schools that want to offer new liberal arts programs on their campuses need to draw also on their strength and resources? It's not stipulated.
Well, I'll just talk to that a little bit. Just from the technical college system side, a college that would be proposing a liberal arts program has to meet quite stringent criteria before it would be approved by their local district board and the state board first. And part of that approval process includes having to demonstrate that they can afford to offer that program without hurting any of their existing programs. And they have to show what the cost is for offering that program and how many students are going to need it. You know, the need is similar to this criteria. So all of that is interwoven into the criteria. It's not separated out. As a pre-professional has more technical type programs, I think that was why the criteria were a bit different. Does that answer your question? Or not
You
quite?
only have 3 campuses in the years that
Right.
offer liberal arts.
Right.
And it just seemed to me that if, in addition to the guidelines for offering new liberal arts programs, that there should be a reference made also to existing resources and strength, as there is in the plan.
Can I just ask Larry excuse me.
Sure.
Larry, would you make a comment?
Well, I think I can, in part, address the reason why the exact same language isn't in both areas, and I think it's because of the different nature of the degrees. As I'm understanding these pre-professional degrees, we're talking about a degree that would be offered by the technical college system, but only in collaboration with a 4-year institution and hopefully a UW institution. And in that collaboration, each would be offering some of the coursework that would be within that degree program. And that's why we said, when you talk about which institution is going to offer what, we want to base that upon the respective strengths of those institutions, which is primarily liberal arts in the UW and technical education in the technical colleges. How that might differentiate from the liberal arts is that that degree, as we understand it, is more of a standalone program. There's a partnership, I think, but not in terms of sharing necessarily the curriculum. So the whole curriculum, like it is at MATC, Madison, and Milwaukee, is offered by that institution, and therefore we didn't use that same language because it wasn't collaborating in the offering of the courses.
So that in establishing new liberal arts programs, you're not using the models that we have at Nicolay, Madison, and Milwaukee.
Oh, I would imagine that that would be very much the models that would be used in making those determinations. by the Technical College Board and
And that particular WCPS institution then would have to have some existing resources in order to be able to pay students in petition to offer this large.
absolutely, I mean, right,
And
and
in the pre-professional programs, you have that those institutions that want to apply, in addition to the three that already are offering that, should, in addition to the guidelines that you have here, should also include that they have to draw on the respective strength of that particular institution in the liberal arts.
And Spirit-wise, that's
Is that implied?
yeah,
that's exactly what I would say.
I think before you could have such a program, you'd have to have the strengths to start,
Right.
or the state board wouldn't even consider it.
Well, we're drawing guidelines now, and I notice its absence, and I thought I'd bring it up. But if you think that it's implied, I go on the record that expressing that concern, and I'm satisfied with your response. But it's not noted as such as it is in the people professional course.
Thank you.
You know, along with Peggy and Libby and Mary and I, we sit on both boards, and it's an interesting, from that perspective, too, to see what's happened in these efforts. And there's been a lot of ups and downs, and I think both boards, and I think we're all encouraged by what's coming before us today. There is, and I again congratulate everybody involved with it, there is quite a history, as President Riley was talking about, efforts at collaboration. I have a resolution passed by the Technical College Board and the Board of Regents in the year 2000 on student transfer collaboration, signed by Sam W. Orr, Jr., President of the UW Board of Regents, and Ann Reed, President of WTCS Board. So it's been a long history here of trying to collaborate on transfer efforts. We went to Kobe that Regent Pruitt and I co-chaired, and I think there was a lot of progress there. Fast forward to, I think, some of our meetings around the state, as we've traveled around the state in the last couple of years and talking about the growth agenda that President Riley was talking about, seeing the demand that our business community and the public at large has for more baccalaureate degree holders in the state of Wisconsin. And certainly the governor has embraced that. I think the legislature will embrace that. So I think we have a duty, and I think we're moving in that direction, to measure what we do here, these criteria and all areas, towards reaching that goal of more baccalaureate degree holders in the state of Wisconsin. I think we're moving in that direction. I'm very encouraged by it. And again, I thank all of who worked on this.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, I just wanted to address maybe Regent Loftus's and Regent Burmester's comments on what was the angst about. Well, I guess I'd say I think the angst was good. And this is a place where the angst sits at the Board of Regents. And what do I mean by that? I think, and Dan can correct me if I have my numbers wrong, but I think there are 16 technical colleges in the Tech College system with 63 locations total where programming is offered. David Wilson raised the question, Chancellor David Wilson, at our last meeting, well, I don't know where all this is going. I mean, where it could go eventually is we could have 63 new community colleges in the state. Could. I don't think it's going there. But I think that's the angst we have to struggle with. And that's why I suggested to you a frame in which to do that in a way that I think will bring our common interests forward, and that is service to the students, and the bad angst as much as possible off the table. But that, that's a real tough question. How are we going to deploy the limited public resources we have, property taxes locally, state taxes at the state level, in the best interest of effective education and cost-efficient education for our students and taxpayers? That's exactly what we need to struggle with. I think, based on the history of struggling with it, we have some ways we know work. And I think we need to evolve those ways, working together as equal partners going forward to get where we need to go in the interest of that service.
I want to also comment as chair, I'll get right to you, Peggy, as chair of the Education Committee, because working closely with Mary and others, I think that I kind of personally experienced the so-called angst. And I will say that I felt very, very sincere, robust discussion is what has happened over the period of time. And I think that we should encourage that. I think that robust discussion was a partnership discussion. It was, here's my concern, and here's my response, and here's my concern, here's what we're trying to get accomplished, and, I can understand that, and but what if, da-da-da. That's exactly what we should be encouraging. We should not be just, in my opinion, suggesting as a Board of Regents that what we should do is just open the door and just cause and roll right on through without looking at impact. I know bureaucracies when I see them. I've worked in some. And I just really think, in fairness to those who had the angst, we should recognize that the process that I participated in, the concerns that I was made aware of, were legitimate, sincere concerns that were worked through. And I commend the fact that we worked through them. And I think that's what we should be about. Peggy.
Yeah. Thank you. I wanted just to comment to the board because, as Brent had suggested, I do sit with him on both boards, and I was a legislator for a long time. And like Regent Loftus, have looked at this issue for a long time, heard from a lot of constituents, a lot of students, a lot of the public who just been concerned about the avenues to reach higher education in our state and the transferability. We've come a long, long way, and both boards have worked very hard. I mean, Kobe was monumental in breaking down some of those barriers. And moving right along, both boards have heard from legislators, from the public, about the mission and what we need to do. The governor certainly has been clear about his wish for us to increase baccalaureate degrees. We're going to talk about admissions and minority admissions and our policies related to admissions in general. But pathways to success is really what this, I think, initiative is all about. We are taking real steps here today to assure that people can come to our institutions from very different directions. And I want to say that this morning I got a call from Michigan, and I want you to know what that call was about. One of my friends said that he was listening to Governor Granholm give her State of the State the other night, and she talked about Wisconsin and how she would like Michigan to emulate our system of broad educational opportunities for all of their citizens. And sometimes we forget about the gems, the jewels that we have here. And I think today is just kind of an acclamation of the good things, of people coming together for the strength of our system, our students, and our public at large. So I just applaud all of you for working very hard, and it's been a privilege to sit on those boards.
Thank you. Judy.
I just want to say that the meeting that we participated in a few weeks ago as a committee was very helpful to me as a relatively new member of this board in understanding some of the questions that I too received from the public, but also within the system. So that I think that the kinds of discussions that have taken place have been very helpful to many of us to learning what not only the breadth of the territory is, but institutionally, I learned a lot about our own institutions. I'm sure this has been done before, but at some point, I really like this board to meet with the Technical System Board. That's probably happened before, but I think that might be a very helpful thing, because we're obviously on the new road. So I'm sure it's happened before, but
Good idea.
I just think that we're at an important point, and that would be greatly helpful.
Excellent.
Madam Chair, I want to add something. Being a frequent denizen of the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, I think we should also meet with the Minnesota Board of Regents. Some issues going on there.
So, unless there's further discussion, let's see here. Okay, so we'll take action tomorrow. So, let's move on to this morning's second agenda item, the UW Systems Freshman Admissions Policy. Let me briefly outline how we will proceed, ground rules, if you will. On this item, there will be no vote until this afternoon's Education Committee meeting. In consultation with my colleague and committee vice chair, Regents Spector, we agreed that we should defer discussion of any specific changes, if any, to the policy until this afternoon in committee. Our feeling is that we will be able to make the best changes, if any, to the proposed policy in committee at the point in which we are taking action. So the full board would then have the opportunity tomorrow to weigh in on any changes, if any, made, and to vote in turn. Remembering that the purpose of this Education Committee All Regents Invited session is to hear from as many regents as possible and to engage in a robust discussion of the issues at hand. To help us do that, here's the order of presenters. We'll start with Senior Vice President Martin, who will review the policy and the proposed changes in detail. President Riley will then describe the input received at last week's public forum and from other sources around the state. He will be followed by Chancellor John Wiley, who will then make comments in support of the policy. I have also been asked to recognize UW-Milwaukee student Carlo Albano, a member of the United Council, and we will give him the podium as well. Now, as you know, we had an open forum in which anyone was able to speak, and many did. Since then, we have received one additional request, and that is from Mr. Albano. After we hear from him, we will open the floor to questions and discussion, which will be led by our fabulous president, David Walsh. So, from the platform of my committee chair seat, let me just say how supportive I am of this policy. I believe that it allows us to meet fully and fairly the responsibility we have as one of the nation's premier systems, as described by the governor of the state of Michigan, higher ed, to educate citizens for a diverse democracy. I could say more, but I will yield the podium to our presenters, starting with Dr. Martin.
Thank you. We first saw this revised policy in December, and I'd like to point out it's not an entirely new policy at all. Rather, it is an effort to consolidate and update 5 existing policies that have been on the books since the UW system was created in 1971. Since you first saw this revised policy in December, we've incorporated some additional changes, and let me quickly review for you the most significant changes. The preamble has been revised to clarify the intent or purpose of this policy as expressed in this statement, and I'll quote, "To provide the highest quality educational opportunity for all students in a diverse learning environment, this policy allows each institution to admit students whose academic preparation, background, and personal experience suggest that the student will succeed at the institution, benefit from that educational experience, and contribute to the educational environment." In Section 2A, under admissions criteria, a new line has been added to clarify our long-standing commitment to academic excellence. And that new statement is, academic factors are the most important consideration in making admissions decisions. Also, in 2A, the policy more clearly states that admissions officers should look at a broad set of available data when analyzing academic performance. Additional examples added since December include quality and rigor of the applicant's college preparatory work and trend in grades. In 2B, the first sentence now refers to ACT and SAT scores as academic information. Section 5 is entirely new, indicating that the Board of Regents shall review this policy every 5 years. This provides for a formal mechanism for ensuring that the language here remains current and that all components of the policy, including the consideration of race and ethnicity, are routinely evaluated. Here's what hasn't changed. The policy still stipulates a set of minimum requirements that all applicants must meet in consideration. graduation from a recognized high school or the equivalent, completion of the UW application, submission of ACT or SAT scores, satisfaction of academic requirements in English, social science, mathematics, natural science, foreign language, fine arts, computer science, and other areas. The policy still codifies a comprehensive individualized review of all UW system applicants. This approach is used by the vast majority of leading American universities. It is the fairest approach for our students and the best method for preserving the highest levels of educational quality at our institutions. As Regent President Walsh has said, no student is a number. That is true. What's also true is that no single number is a reliable indicator of success. For example, a student with a 3.8 GPA who chose to take less challenging courses may not be considered as favorably as a student who took honors or advanced placement courses and earned a 3.6 GPA. Under the comprehensive review framework, this policy also empowers our admissions experts to analyze non-academic factors and whether those factors tell us anything about how the student will perform in college, how they will benefit from that experience, and how they will enhance the quality of our campuses. This list of other factors in 2C still includes a broad set of factors and the ability to include other relevant information. Included as examples are factors such as work experience, leadership, community service, status as a non-traditional or returning adult, status as a veteran of the U.S. military, whether the applicant is socioeconomically disadvantaged, whether the applicant is a member of a historically underrepresented racial or ethnic group. The policy before you is race conscious. It is not a race-based or race preference policy. These non-academic factors, including race, will never be the sole criterion in the selection process, nor will they ever be the most important factors. As I noted earlier, academic factors are the most important consideration in making admissions decisions. The use of race and ethnicity as one of many factors considered in a comprehensive admissions review reflects a fundamental truth, that diversity in our student body is a compelling interest of a public university. As an educator, I know that learning is most effective in environments where students interact with people who possess different educational experiences, opinions, and viewpoints. The benefits of learning in a diverse environment accrue to all students during and after their college experience, and they accrue to the institution itself. I mentioned that we have already made some changes to the policy. Many of those were based on input and suggestions received from others. I'd now like to invite President Riley to talk more about how we went about gathering that input.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. As Rebecca already mentioned, this revised freshman admissions policy first came before you at your December meeting, the result of our efforts to consolidate and update 5 existing Regents policies related to admission. Based on questions and concerns expressed by legislators and others, the Board of Regents postponed action on the admissions policy at its December meeting and undertook a highly transparent, very open process over 2 months to engage the public in a conversation about this policy update. Part of this process entailed personal briefings with legislative leaders and their staffs. This included personal meetings with the chairs of the 2 legislative committees responsible for overseeing higher education. On Monday, January 29th, the Regents held a 3-hour public forum on the admissions policy. Using our video conferencing networks out of the Pyle Center here on the Madison campus, we facilitated live interaction among participants at 5 different locations: UW Eau Claire, UW Green Bay, UW Madison, UW Milwaukee, and UW Stevens Point. The public forum was covered extensively in the news media around the state, indicating that citizens were well aware of this opportunity for input. 10 Regents participated in the forum at 4 of the 5 sites. All Regents have since had the opportunity to view the archived streaming video from that event. We've provided a written summary of the comments offered by speakers at all 5 sites. These summaries include not only those remarks that were carried on the video conference, but also a synopsis of the local discussions that in each case followed at the sites with campus leaders and admissions officers. Among the comments we received, Senator Glenn Grothman participated from Milwaukee, expressing his concerns about any use of race and ethnicity. Along with Senator Grothman, 4 other speakers expressed similar concerns about the use of race and ethnicity. These included former Regent Fred Mose and UW-Madison Professor Emeritus Lee Hansen. A side note, I later spoke with Regent Emeritus Mose, who expressed his appreciation for the opportunity. He and others who took his position had to speak at the forum and the even-handed manner in which the forum was conducted, and he's since written, I believe, to both President Walsh and me to express that same feeling. Many other speakers spoke in support of diversity and a race-conscious admissions policy. For example, Madison attorney Michelle Benke explained how her son scored in the top 5% of all African Americans on his ACT, but did not get admitted to UW-Madison. Including Ms. Benke, a total of 26 people spoke on the video conference in support of this policy and the university's strong commitment to diversity in our student body. These included student leaders, high school counselors, parents, and university faculty members. Now, in advance of that public forum, we launched a special website, www.wisconsin.edu/admissions, where people could review the text of this policy as well as related articles and materials. On the site, we posted links to a detailed report from the College Board called Selection Through Individualized Review. Links to testimony by UW System Associate Vice President Larry Rubin and Assistant Vice President Vicki Washington offered to the Wisconsin Legislative Council Special Committee on Affirmative Action. We had links on that site to documents shared at that same committee by UW-Madison Chancellor John Wiley and Admissions Director Rob Simpson. And we had links to Representative Steve Nass's January 18th news release about our public forum. At that same website, people were invited to send us their comments on the draft policy. We received approximately 50 comments and questions. These included emails generated from the website, plus various letters and telephone messages. Copies of every message are included in your packets. Unlike the speakers at our public forum, the majority of emails and letters expressed concerns about the policy, but from several different points of view. Not all of those points of view are related to the use of race and ethnicity. Some address issues around applicants' disabilities, legacy status, and in-state residency. More than anything, it seems to me that these letters and emails reflect a great deal of anxiety and confusion around the whole college admissions process. It's important to remember, I think, that such tension will always exist at our most competitive, selective campuses. Any of you, and I know many of you have, who've been through this process, not just as students, but as parents, know that it can be and usually is anxiety-ridden. That won't go away regardless of what we do about this policy. Along with that understandable anxiety, many of the comments we've seen and heard expressed about this policy reflect, I think, an ongoing level of confusion. And I'd like to address some of these misconceptions here. Misconception number 1, the UW is full. Not true. There is a place in our public university system, as Regent Crane reminded us in a recent meeting, for any motivated student who wants to pursue a college degree. There is a place in the UW system for any motivated student who wants to pursue a college degree. Even if some can't get admitted to the campus of their first choice as incoming freshmen, these Wisconsin students have ample opportunities to enroll somewhere in our system. And it's not how you start that counts, it's how you finish. And Wisconsin students have the opportunity to transfer to another UW campus of their choice after a semester or several semesters, including to our flagship institution, UW-Madison. Misconception number 2, unqualified students will be admitted. First, it makes no sense for us to admit students who are likely to fail. Today, I can tell you that every student on our 26 campuses has been judged to be qualified to be there. That's why they're there. That won't change if you adopt this updated policy. The consideration of leadership, veteran status, of race, of socioeconomic status, of work experience, of other factors is not a substitute for consideration of academic preparation. Rather, these are factors we examine when selecting students from a large pool of academically qualified applicants. Misconception number 3. This is a race-based policy. This policy, as Rebecca said, is grounded in the best practices within higher education nationally. If anything, it is a success-based policy. It ensures that students are selected based on their likelihood of individual success at the institution. This policy is no more a race-based policy than it is a veteran status-based policy or a work experience-based policy. All of these factors and more are considered in a comprehensive review of individual students. But the admissions decision is not based on any one of these factors. The policy is designed to ensure that students will be prepared for success in the knowledge economy workforce. And it puts the state of Wisconsin on the path to success in an increasingly competitive, diverse global marketplace. As Rebecca again mentioned, the policy clearly states that, quote, academic factors are the most important consideration in making admissions decisions, unquote. They always have been, they always will be. Academics trump all other factors in this policy. Misconception number 4. Out-of-state students are displacing Wisconsin students. The policy clearly states that out-of-state undergraduate enrollments should not exceed 25% at any institution. This is not a change in the policy. That's been in the policy for a long time. And I think very often people hear that and think, oh, we've got 25% out-of-state students in the UW. No, that's the cap on the number that you can have in any one institution. What are the numbers, the actual numbers? Currently, approximately 78% of UW-Madison's undergraduates are Wisconsin or Minnesota reciprocity students, 78% at Madison. At the other campuses, Wisconsin residents and Minnesota reciprocity students comprise anywhere from 91 to 98% of the undergraduate population. Putting Madison aside, the populations, undergraduate populations at our other campuses range between 91 and 98%. Minnesota, Wisconsin students, mainly Wisconsin students. We've had some recent communications about the policy that's before you for consideration since the communications that you've already received in your packets. And I think you've seen 2 of them, and these 2 are significant because they come from, on the one hand, the chair of the Higher Education Committee in the Assembly, Representative Steve Nass, and on the other hand, the chair of the Higher Education Committee in the Senate, Senator Kathleen Weinoff. You have those letters in your packets, I believe, and we will have an opportunity to discuss them more in the Education Committee this afternoon. I note that they fall out on 2 different sides of this issue. Representative Nass has some serious concerns about the policy. Senator Weinoff supports the policy. We've also received some recent communications from business leaders. Let me just give you a little sample from some. Bill Harvey, the chairman, president, and CEO of Reliant Energy Corporation, wrote to say, quote, a diverse student body is not only important to the continued success of our public school system, but also to companies such as ours that rely heavily on those students for our future workforce, unquote. Paul Lasciazza, the former president of SBC Wisconsin, who's now president of AT&T in Illinois, writes in a letter to Chancellor John Wiley, quote, we realize that diversity and inclusion give our company a competitive edge. They are essential if we are to be successful in the marketplace. He goes on to say, quote, I would think that a University of Wisconsin admissions policy would include a diversity component for the same basic reason that AT&T includes diversity and inclusion in its business plan. And one more, from Andrew J. Smiltnik, who is the Director of Innovation Management Implementation at Kimberly-Clark Corporation. Mr. Smiltnik said this, quote, "We regard the diversity of our workforce and the knowledge to work in a diverse workforce as imperative to our survival in a very tough global marketplace. Further, while we teach inclusion to our employees to maximize the performance of our organizations, we believe that it is the responsibility of our university partners to provide employees who already know the power of a diverse group and know how to work in this atmosphere." I wish I could state this more strongly. So, I am recommending to you that you adopt this policy for many reasons, but let me enumerate the main points. Number one, again, academics come first. The policy stipulates a set of minimum requirements that all applicants must meet or exceed for consideration. Among the criteria used in making selections from among applicants, academic factors are the most important consideration in the admissions process. Number two, academic performance and potential are best determined by the comprehensive review that this process, this policy lays out. No single numerical score, we know, is a reliable predictor. Grade point average and standardized test scores are important factors, but they are not the only factors that we should consider. Put another way, as Regent Walsh has said, no student is a number, and every applicant deserves our full consideration as a whole person. Point number three, diversity does matter. The U.S. Supreme Court reaffirmed the educational benefits of a diverse student body and the use of policies like this as a means to enhance the university's educational mission. Our current policies on the books for decades value diversity and include race as one factor among many. As the Supreme Court recognized, doing that is one way for us to accomplish our educational mission. And I don't think we can do it adequately in the present atmosphere without being able to do that. As you talk with people about this issue and follow much of the press coverage, it seems clear that a lot of the attention to admissions and this updated policy is focused on the UW-Madison campus. So with that in mind, I'd like to invite Chancellor John Wiley to say a few words. John.
I wish I could, like most speakers who come before this group.
You feel like,
Three different voices on the same topic. I think same issues come back for the third time and begin to think, maybe I've just been around too long.
Kevin did such a good job summarizing the feedback and the issues that he didn't really leave much for me to say. I do think you have two separable issues here. One of them is a philosophical or public policy issue or question. Should race be a consideration at all? Should we have a race-conscious policy? The second is a technical issue, which is how do we judge academic preparation? How do we judge which students are best prepared to make good use of our educational opportunities without a burdensome amount of extra help or something? The first one, the philosophical issue, I think is a no-brainer. Quite aside from the letters that we get from industry, when I was speaking before the Lunch Council a couple of weeks ago, I was grilled extensively and challenged in a sort of combative way, I thought, to prove that industry is really telling us that if we don't do a better job of producing a diverse body of graduating students, they really won't be able to afford to come around and recruit here anymore. Well, these are the kinds of things that you hear again and again from recruiters and from industry executives, but that don't always get put into writing. We put a fair bit of effort in the last couple of weeks into writing to all those people who have said things like this to us and getting some feedback, and Kevin read you excerpts from some of the letters. I can tell you from personal experience. I've had former students who are now recruiters for Intel and HP, Paul Oskiaza, Andy Smiltnik, lots and lots of other executives have been telling us this for years, that diversity is vitally important for their company, for their competitiveness, for their creativity, and they expect us to recognize that because we're important suppliers of human resources to them. And if we can't do a better job, they can find it elsewhere. So to us, it's a strategic issue, if for no other reason than that. But really, I think there's a more important point. I suspect most people could agree with the statement that race should be irrelevant. I suspect that most people of color would be the ones who feel most passionately that race should be irrelevant. But to take that philosophical position, or that idealistic statement, and then turn around and say, therefore it is irrelevant, is a leap of logic that just doesn't pass any test I know of. I don't know how you could possibly have lived through the last century if you weren't asleep in a cave somewhere and claim that race is irrelevant. Every newspaper, every day for my entire life has contained evidence that race is relevant. Every person I know who's not a white male has experienced life differently than I have because of their gender or their color or their background. And it just can't be irrelevant. People look at our universities and ask, do people like me, however I identify myself, have a realistic chance there? And if we need to be able to answer that question affirmatively. Yes, we're not discriminating adversely against anyone. So we need to pay attention. We need to have race-conscious policies. I don't see any alternative. On the technical side, there's not much to add to what Kevin said and to the summary of the policy you're proposing, except maybe this. Don't let anyone tell you that academic preparation is summarized adequately by test scores, grades, class ranks, or any combination of the three. That's not nearly enough information to judge academic preparation. If you combine all of those bits of numerical information in the mathematically best possible way to extract the most information they contain, they will explain about 15 to 20% of the observed variance in first-year grades, which is the only test anyone ever subjects them to. Any other test beyond that, they're less effective. So, for example, those three numbers, or those three indicators, again, combined in the best way possible, explain less than 10% of the observed variance in graduation. Now, why on earth, if we know that 80 to 85% or 90+% of what matters is something else other than those three indicators, why would we base our entire admissions process just on that? It makes no sense. So, for years, Madison has been looking at lots of other things. Don't let anyone tell you that two students who have a 3.8 are identical. They're not. You can get 3.8 in a lot of different ways, and those different ways can make a difference. 3.8 from one school is not the same as 3.8 from another school. Don't let anyone tell you that two students with a 28 ACT are identical. You can get a 28 in a lot of different ways. You can get two 36s and a 12. That's different from three 28s. So we look at everything that's interesting is in the details, not in the aggregated statistics. And we look at everything in the student's file. We look at how they got the grades they got. We recompute their GPA. We don't just take the high school's word for it. We throw out all the courses that aren't academic and recompute a new GPA. We look at the trends in their GPAs. We look at their school, whether or not it offered AP courses. If they were offered and the applicant didn't take advantage of it, I don't care what the GPA is. We're not likely to admit that student. We reject some students who apply with a 36 ACT. There's only one way to get 36. You get 36 on all parts of the test. You miss no questions. You get a 36. We've rejected students with a 36 because they didn't do a very good job in their course selections and didn't make very good grades in their courses. It happens. And vice versa. We've had students with very low ACTs who've done a superb job of selecting their courses and have done well at them. So you really do have to look at everything. You also have to look at how they achieved what they achieved. Did they overcome adversity in various ways? We have schools in Wisconsin that are as good as any prep schools anywhere in the world. We have schools that are positively abysmal, and students don't have much choice about which schools they go to in many cases. We need to give everyone an opportunity to show that despite what they've had the opportunity to do up until now, they have the potential. They've shown evidence of the potential to take advantage of what we offer and do well here. Finally, let me address the last thing Kevin said, that there's, I couldn't agree more that there's way too much focus on the alleged difficulties of getting into Madison. We make it as easy as we possibly can. We provide lots of routes in. It's true that about a quarter of the students who walk across the stage at commencement entered as transfer students. So we do have lots of routes in, and I know there's tremendous pressure on getting into our freshman class. Unfortunately, a lot of that is perceived prestige and parental bragging rights as opposed to good, sound educational decisions. I think, frankly, we all need to do a better job. The Regents, in particular, our legislators, our elected officials who have put this system in place, need to do a better job of selling to the public the fact that we have a system with 13 very fine four-year schools, and, as Kevin said, a place for everyone, not necessarily at your preferred first choice. Anything you can do to help with that would be great.
I think at this point we'll hear from a student. Mr. Obama? The podium? Yep, thank you.
Good morning to the Regents, administration, faculty, and guests. My name is Carlo Albano, and I'm a student from UW-Milwaukee, also a member of the United Council of UW students. Thank you for having me here and allowing students to say at this juncture. Let it be known that students stand beside you, as we have all along, on your efforts to protect and to promote our holistic freshman admissions policy. As a show of our solidarity, the United Council of UW students, a voice of over 100,000 UW students statewide, passed a resolution in support of your efforts to further institutionalize our holistic admissions policy. Faculty stands with you as well. As a student of UWM, I supported our Faculty Senate's decision to reaffirm the value of holistic admissions by voting in favor of such considerations that the UW system has recommended. Administration throughout the UW system has also taken the time to bring a voice of support to this policy of furthering institutional diversity on our campuses. As a resident born and raised in the city of Milwaukee, I understand firsthand the impact that race and poverty has on the lives and well-being of Wisconsin residents. Please allow yourselves consideration of Milwaukee as a fine example of why the holistic admissions policy is of great present and future value. As a student outreach mentor and recruiter for UW-Milwaukee, I simply cannot say that I see a level playing ground in the education that we have available for our younger students throughout the city. The innumerable disparities between our inner city schools and the schools that surround them in the suburbs simply cannot be denied. For example, students hailing from the latter and more affluent high schools have the opportunity to take weighted extracurricular classes, allowing them the potential to come into college with a GPA of 5.0. And at the same time, we have high schools such as North Division and South Division that continue to run with less resources and opportunities, some of these even as basic as guidance counselors and quality computer labs. And thank you, Chancellor Wiley, for bringing up that issue as well. Although these admissions policies is not, although this admissions policy is not a remedy for Milwaukee's problems, I respect that it takes into consideration all aspects of a student's educational background, including the pivotal factor of racial and socioeconomic disadvantages and advantages that these people have been exposed to. I believe we all stand in agreement here that higher education is also a means of social alleviation through diverse students learning and giving back to all facets of our society. Your vote will make a clear statement that Wisconsin really values such diversity. This is a crucial step in the right direction, and as one voice of many students, I want to thank you, and I look forward to working with you again as we approach the final stages of Plan 2008, as well as the Equity Scorecard pilot. Thank you very much.
Being Before turning over to the esteemed and fabulous, you've got a new President Walsh.
Wow.
May I ask, Mr. Albano, what year are you at UWM? Wonderful, thank you. Okay, take it away, David.
Regent discussion? Regent Walker.
Questions for Chancellor Wiley, or if the admissions director is here for John, either one. But John, I want to refer back to this newsletter from the admissions director, which I find the most valuable information the Regents are given, by the way. He is really pleading in this to parents and students that there are alternative ways into Madison, and he goes through the connections program, the guaranteed transfer program, the transfer contracts you have with MATC, and what is it, Nicolay, and there's a third one, Milwaukee, and he makes the point that 20% of the graduates at UW-Madison came there through this transfer route. This issue we're discussing is basically about Madison. Those freshmen admitted to Madison on the transfer contracts obviously have a different admissions decision about them than the traditional freshmen, than if they were admitted as freshmen. Then there is the third freshman, and that is the guaranteed transfer program from the colleges. So, is it fair to say that you have at least 3 freshman admission policies or decisions to be made about the student?
Not exactly. And Rob is here, so he'll correct me if I make any misstatements here. First, let me dispense with the guaranteed transfer, because that's a separate issue. We offer a guaranteed transfer program. In fact, I believe all of the UW system 4-year institutions do, to students who are enrolled in the 2-year colleges. They can sign up for a guaranteed transfer program with one of the 4 years, and if they follow the rules of that agreement, then at the time they're ready to transfer to a 4-year school, they are guaranteed they will be admitted. So they did not apply to us initially necessarily. They went straight to a 2-year school and then entered this guaranteed transfer program. Even those students who aren't in a guaranteed transfer program can apply for transfer, and many of them successfully transfer as well. The real distinction that I think you're asking about is between the students who are admitted directly out of high school as new freshmen at Madison and the students who are admitted but are offered the Madison Connections program as their route in. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. We got about 23,000 applications. That was the number this year. Some relatively small number of those, when the admissions officers look them over, they say, this is a no-brainer or a slam dunk or something. There is no way we're ever going to not admit this student. So why not just do it now? So they're admitted immediately. There's another relatively small set of applicants where we look at the record and we say, there is no way this student will ever be admitted. Right now they're simply not prepared, and there's no way we could pretend that they are, and they're turned down for admission. The vast majority of the applications are put into a sort of a wait list, and then we work our way through them systematically over the months, culminating usually in March, I think. I'm watching for affirmative nods over there. And we admit until we think we've admitted so many students that we're at risk of going over our target for the freshman class size. Then we tell other students, and in fact I think we tell everyone who's on that wait list, if you would like an immediate decision, we're prepared to offer you right now admission as a Madison Connection student. You're free to wait also for a final yes or no decision on admission this semester directly as a freshman in Madison. Is that about right, Rob?
Yes, you have it generally right.
Sounds like the start of a safe answer. Actually, for a chancellor, John does a terrific job of understanding the admissions policy very well, and the practice. In general, there's about 4,000 students that we put in the postponed group. And of those, we wait and look at fall term grades. Sometimes students submit new information. There's a supplemental application that students have an opportunity to fill out. And from that, end of February, beginning of March, so it's pretty soon coming up, we top up our freshman class for the spaces that we have that we can still admit to not go over enrollment.
Okay, so I get that. Then here's the question. If 1 in 5 of your graduates are transferred, that means X number of the students you admitted as freshmen did not make it through to graduation.
I can tell you what X is, roughly. Of our new freshmen, about 80% will graduate on time without stopping out for any significant amount of time. They just go straight through their programs and get a degree. Of the 20% that don't do that, we can follow up about 15 of the 20 and find that they eventually graduate either here or somewhere. And then there's about 5% that we lose track of. Is that about right? So, another 5% will graduate somewhere?
5% will graduate somewhere else. So we end up with 86% graduate somewhere, and 15% are undiscoverable.
So of your admitting, those admitted to the freshman class under this criteria, 15% don't graduate.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Let me just, if I could, either with Chancellor Weiler or President Riley, follow up on, I think, something we talked about a little bit yesterday, about that if we abandon what our policy has been in the past on race and go more towards what Ward Connolly and others are suggesting, the effect it's going to have on the higher education system as a whole, which I think, as I understand, might be to increase the amount of diversity in private universities and decrease it in our public universities. Because the private universities are still going to have more, if Connolly and others are successful, would still have more ability to in their admissions policy, where we would not. And what you would have in effect is a private system getting more opportunities, more, and I think attracting more diverse, and with the public institutions being more restricted, which seems to me very backwards. Is that, am I missing something, or is that would be the potential result?
It's one of those I don't know where to start questions because it's very complicated. But I will say this about what Mr. Connolly recommends. He apparently told the same Ledge Council that I had to address that we should simply admit the top 10% of any high school in the state, and that would be a mistake for a whole variety of reasons. There are two kinds of mistakes you can make in admissions. You can admit someone you shouldn't have, or you can turn down someone you should have admitted. We'll never know about the latter kind of mistake. If you don't admit them, you don't give them a chance to show whether they could succeed or not. But we know this for sure. There are lots of students who graduate in the top 10% of their class who flunk out, or who fail to graduate, let's put it that way. And we try hard to figure out who they are and not admit them in the first place. So we do turn down students from the top 10% of the class. And I'd hate to be told, for political reasons, that we have to admit students we think will not succeed.
Eileen?
Just a question for you. Listening to you discuss your admissions policy at this point, this new policy really will have little impact on Madison.
Zero. That's what we do already.
You're already doing it. And because I hear it in the Valley all the time, my child didn't get into Madison and all upset because their child's not going to get into Madison. It's not going to matter. You're already doing all this. True?
True.
Perfect.
I want to talk to John too. I think when we, obviously, many of the questions that we get as Regents are about Madison, and you're well aware of that. And there are two things that I'd like to test and see if I'm a graduate of Madison in 1959. I'd like to think I would be admitted to Madison today, but the fact of the matter is, all the people in the upper portions of my high school class who wanted to go to Madison were admitted. My son graduated from Madison in the 1980s. It was somewhat more restrictive at that time, but not appreciably, and they had good high school records and they were admitted. I think we have to recognize that part of the issue today is because that has changed, and that people don't, and people who went to Madison or knew people who went to Madison don't understand that change fully, and then that all feeds into that. The other thing is that in trying to explain to people about Madison admissions, I think it should be said that there are any number of people that you are picking among qualified applicants. And we are not saying that people who were not admitted would not succeed there. And I think that that's an important point, because I think people feel rejected in a way that is unnecessary.
Well, I'll make two comments about that. First, to the last one, we do a lot of consistency checking on our admissions decisions. So, for example, Senator Grothman asked me a hypothetical question about two identical people living side by side. The only thing different is their race. Which one would we admit? And he didn't like my answer, but it's the truth. My answer was we would do the same thing. Both. We would either admit them both or reject them both, because we pay a lot of attention to very close comparable cases and try to do the fair thing, which is treat both the same. I don't think he was convinced. That's a fact. As to the 1960s compared to today, in the 1960s, it's true that if you graduated in the top half of your class, you didn't even have to worry about whether you would be admitted. You would be admitted. That's the upside. It gave lots and lots of people a chance to succeed. The downside is the graduation rate was about 33%. And today, even around the country, it's a very robust number. Open admission schools have graduation rates that are in the 35. I said 33%. It was about that. 35 to 38% is the graduation rate if you apply no selectivity. If you don't try to predict success and just admit whoever applies, that will be the graduation rate you get. And if you believe that that's a wise and sound use of public resources to bring in up to 2/3 of the students who are not going to succeed and get a degree, well, then maybe we should do that.
I was not suggesting that as preferable.
Oh, no, I understand that.
Could I add to that question a little bit? There are a couple of things that I see as sort of feeding the sort of frenzy, is the way I think of it. First, our application volume. So we tend to be more and more popular. We're not trying to become more selective. We spend a lot of time on the deny letter because we don't want it to imply that the student can't do the work here. Spend a ton of time on that letter. But in fact, our freshman class has stayed the same size for a long period of years, and our application volume has gone up from 16,000 to 23,000 over a 10-year period. The other thing that I think is really happening is that there is a lot of grade inflation. There's a lot of evidence in the high school. So people say, well, gosh, I got into Madison 10 years ago. I couldn't get in now when I look at the newsletter that you're citing. And in fact, there's so much grade inflation that somebody now in the top half of their class could have a 3.5. Whereas when some of us a little bit older graduated, top half of the class was a 2.3 or something like that. So it's hard to compare over a period of years. The numbers don't mean the same things.
Thank you.
Regent Salas.
Yes, Chancellor Wiley, I wanted to ask you, at this body, we've discussed a number of times a concern for making sure that we give the opportunity to our campuses to all income level of groups. And we've brought to your attention, and I think that you've have been very receptive to the concerns that we have about admitting qualified students from lower socioeconomic levels. If you say that this policy will not change anything at Madison, how do we deal in the rest of the campuses with the question of as far as policy is concerned now? We're not talking about financial aid as such. Admitting qualified students from low income. Does this policy that we have at this time, is there any way that we can design it so that it addresses this issue, or are we obliged to deal with it exclusively as a financial aid issue who wants the students in 100% capital?
I'm going to ask Rob to help me with this, but first let me say that our admissions policy as such doesn't have accurate family income information. So family income per se is not a factor in the admissions process. So I think the private schools would say it's a need-blind process. Having said that, one of the factors that we do look at and try to take into account is this applicant the first of his or her family to go to college? And about 20% of our new freshman class are first-generation college goers. Whether that's the right number or not is maybe for other people to judge, but that's what it is.
Regent Davis.
I think Chancellor Wiley made a lot of excellent points. One that I continue to applaud is this notion that this admissions policy is about more than Madison. This admission policy is telling students, parents of students, guidance counselors of students, people who work with students, of all students, that the whole person, the individual, is going to be considered when making determination or decisions around admissions to any of our institutions. I think that's a good message. I think that's an inclusive message. I think if we think, and we should think about who are we speaking to, that they need to hear where we are and what we're for. I'm often on record as saying, let's talk about what we stand for and not so much spend so much time about what we're against or what we're defending against and so on. And I think we've made huge strides in this direction. I think this policy speaks very positively to the very students for whom we are speaking to. So I support that.
Regent Rosenzweig.
Yeah, thank you. I want to say at the outset that I support the policy, but I do have a question. I was reviewing Representative Nass's letter, and just because I think it's important to answer all questions that are out there publicly as it relates to the statutes, I guess I'd ask, and I don't know who it is I want to ask, but perhaps our board president could answer, or he raises the question about the statute numbered 36.11, paren 3, paren A. And he says that we are in violation of that state statute, and I wonder if anybody could clarify that.
There's really two statutes that are being questioned, 3611.3A and 36.12, both of which deal with the reference to using race in admissions. It's a complicated argument, but or answer, but and I'll ask Pat to fill in. But it goes like this: in 1972, when that legislation was passed, and it had to do with merger, we did have a policy at that time that considered ethnicity. So that was on the table, and when they passed it, it was reality. Subsequently, 3612 was passed, and it really is a mimicking of Title VI, and that is the title that was also considered in the Michigan Supreme Court case, where the United States Supreme Court specifically held, as a finding of fact, confirmation of affidavits, that educational benefits flow from a diverse student body. And if a state wishes to use race as a factor in promoting a compelling state interest defined as diversity of student body, it is in compliance with the United States Supreme Court as well as Title VI. And it also put a time limit on it, probably 2 generations. The issue really here in Wisconsin is that a compelling state interest. Do people agree that a diverse student body is important? But in answer to Representative Nass, and also Professor Hansen has been raising this issue, you look to the past and the legislative history. If you look at the reviser's notes to 36.12, it specifically cites a Supreme Court case implying that the statute is not contrary to that decision. Now, this may need further clarification, but there's a very good argument that those 2 statutes do not preclude using race as a factor, not a determinative, but as a factor, consistent with the Supreme Court case. Pat, can you add to that?
I think you've covered pretty much all the points I would make. I would say, though, that our policy documents, as you know, are numbered by the year in which they're adopted. The number 7211, which is under consideration as part of your action today, was actually adopted prior to the merger statute, which was enacted actually as part of the laws of 1973, but really in 1974. So at that time, the legislature would have been aware and, in fact, cited to the existence of the 1972 policy, which did include ethnicity. So the theory would be that, had they had a concern about what we were then doing, it would have been addressed, more specifically than it was. And the conclusion is that, therefore, what we've been doing, the practice, is consistent with that statute.
Let me just add something to show you how complicated it gets. There was also a statute prior to 3611.3. It was 3609 or 3606, I believe, which included you can't discriminate with employees or admissions. Those two concepts were broken out into 2 statutes. Yet at the same time, we had affirmative action statutes regarding employees, and we have federal laws regarding federal contracting. So you have to look at a statute in the context of the time it was passed, the legislative history, and the impact of Supreme Court cases. We think that clearly those 2 statutes do not preclude us from going forward. Now, we may be wrong in the long run, but until then, we have a challenge, and we're responding to it.
I thank you very much, and I think it was good to hear that discussion publicly, so thank you.
Just a second time, I want to go around once. Anybody else?
Okay.
Regent Bradley.
This is a very big discussion, primarily about the Madison campus. I think if just for a moment you pretended that we didn't have a Madison campus, I think people at La Crosse would agree that they've had this very same discussion in their more competitive programs. I think at UW-Stevens Point and the College of Natural Resources, they've had this same kind of discussion. Wherever you have a highly competitive situation and you've got parents who look at their sons and daughters and they say, why can't my kid get into X? We don't have a meritocracy system here. We have, and I believe La Crosse would say yes to this, and I believe Stevens Point would say yes to this, and all the other campuses. We have had for a long time, going back, the earliest thing I've seen is 1972, where we've had it in our materials, where we have looked at a number of factors. We were talking about race. We've had ethnicity in our factors and job experience, and looking at this whole student for a very long time. It's a hot topic now, focusing on our most competitive campus, but we have many versions of this discussion all over the state of Wisconsin.
Regent Lotus.
Just a little bit of history here. Of course, when we were in 60s and 70s, there was a draft, and if you didn't get admitted to the university, you were admitted to the draft. And there was a great issue during this time about the quality of students, especially men. Then you go into this period after merger where we came upon this next big crisis, which was all encapsulated in faculty pay and enrollment. And the issue with enrollment was the enrollment was happening at a few campuses and not the others. So Madison, and I think it was Oshkosh, Eau Claire, maybe Whitewater, it looked that the trend line was going, they were going to grow, and the other campuses that we had around the state were going to wither. So the decision was enrollment caps for the purpose of limiting enrollment at certain schools so it would increase enrollment at other schools. And that worked brilliantly. The question from the university was, well, how are we going to limit admissions to meet these enrollment caps? And the answer was, use academic standards. So here you have the academic standards used in a way to limit enrollment. And John mentioned this. You have so many applicants, you have so many spaces. You have to have a way to hit your enrollment target. But these students can always have the opportunity to go elsewhere in the state. And that actually was the goal. But they should go elsewhere in the state, including the centers. So there has to be a way to admit students that make sense for the university and for the academic requirements and the student body requirements. So this system that we have, I think, is the best there is. And I hope that we will endorse it one more time.
Regent Pruitt.
I just wanted to echo comments that I know a lot of my colleagues have made. You know, on a macro level, this policy seems to me to be a reflection of moving us closer to the day that I know UW-Madison has already been doing over the last few years, moving us closer to the day when the University of Wisconsin looks like the state of Wisconsin. And I think that that needs to be, I think the overwhelming majority of the citizens of this state, if they understand that as on a macro level as our policy goal, will endorse it and support it. On a micro level, I just want to commend the President, Regent Davis, President Riley, Chancellor Wiley, and others for sort of this the openness of this process and the communication that has happened in this process. This is one of these policies, I believe, that the more we talk about it, the better we do. And the more people understand it, the easier it is for them to accept it. If we hide from it, if we avoid the conversation, I think we don't do the policy justice, and I don't think we do sort of the process justice. So I want to just commend everyone for the openness that has happened and hope that we'll continue to do it going forward.
Thank you. I have a quick comment. We should remember why we're here. What started this, and that was the Michigan case in the United States Supreme Court, which said that you may use race to perform or to satisfy a compelling state need of diversity, but it must only be a factor. And so we had to go back to the drawing board and make sure that our policy complied with that, and the Supreme Court asked people who are doing that to do that. So we're marching forward with the recommendations, and the people have done the work, and at the same time, there are some other dynamics, and to me, the message is getting lost in the issue of race, and those dynamics are the growth initiative, the reaching out to the other students, the Governor's Covenant, which is a wonderful initiative that I think will make a difference in the country when they see what we do. And we need to send a message, because this isn't just about race. It's about the values that we care about in the state, and it's about veterans. It's about people with work experience. It's about people who are having a second chance. It's about the physically disadvantaged. And it's people who have come from different backgrounds. And so this is a time to send that message, and I'm disappointed that some people would try to say that this is about race when it in fact isn't. And you know, I think back that to me the threshold issue is, do we need a diverse student body? And when you see the kinds of statements from the business community that that they want us to have a diverse student body. And it isn't because they want to hire diversity, it's because they want to hire people who understand diversity, who have lived through, who have had an educational experience with different ideas from different people, who have different abilities and capabilities. And that's what Kimberly-Clark is asking us for. That's what Exxon and Intel is asking us for, because they don't want somebody that doesn't understand the need to work in the global marketplace. And that's the loud volume response we heard from business. They said, you must be diverse, not just for the person we bring in that is diverse, but for the white student from Brookfield and Madison West. They learn too. And they learn from the disadvantaged, and they learn from the veterans. And I have a son who reads through a straw, and he will do much. Thank you.
So I guess at this point, I'd like to thank everyone. This process, while extended, has been extremely helpful to the Regents, and I hope in the end, the citizens of Wisconsin, too. To reiterate, the Education Committee will take action on the freshman admissions policy when we resume our meeting after lunch. So we stand adjourned as the Education Committee, all readings at 12:15 p.m.
Thank you.
All right.
Well.